He is one of the greatest heroes of Middle-earth, an incarnate being who took on a physical form to aid the free peoples in their struggle against the Dark Lord. But at the moment he was asked to go by the Valar, he did not want to, for what some see as a surprising reason. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover Gandalf's fear of Sauron. Our story begins around 1,000 years into the Third Age. Seeing yet another rise of the Dark Lord Sauron is imminent, Manwe calls a council of the Valar. At this meeting, they decide to send 3 emissaries from Valinor to Middle-earth in order to aid and guide the free peoples. We read of this meeting in Unfinished Tales. Who would go? For they must be mighty, peers of Sauron, but must forego might, and clothe themselves in flesh, so as to treat on equality and win the trust of elves and men. But this would imperil them, dimming their wisdom and knowledge, and confusing them with fears, cares, and wearinesses coming from the flesh. But 2 only came forward. Curumo, that is Saruman, who was chosen by Aule, and Alatar, one of the Blue Wizards, who was sent by Orome. Then Manwe asked, where was Olórin, as Gandalf is known in Valinor, and Olórin, who was clad in gray and having just entered from a journey had seated himself at the edge of the council, asked what Manwe would have of him. Manwe replied that he wished Olórin to go as the 3rd messenger to Middle-earth. Already in this excerpt, we see a hint of Gandalf's reluctance, having seated himself at the edge of the council, and having to be asked about by Manwe. It seems almost like a student hoping not to be called upon by their teacher. Tolkien goes on to say why Gandalf is so hesitant, but Olórin declared that he was too weak for such a task, and that he feared Sauron. Then Manwe said that that was all the more reason why he should go, and Manwe commanded Olórin to go as the 3rd. So Olórin would go to Middle-earth, becoming known as Gandalf. With him is Saruman and Alatar, the first 2 Maiar chosen, as well as Eowendil, who Yavanna would choose and would become known as Radagast. And finally would be Pallando, Alatar's friend and fellow Blue Wizard. While Tolkien would later write that the Blue Wizards would arrive in Middle-earth during the Second Age, Gandalf, Saruman, and Radagast would arrive at the Grey Havens around the year 1000 of the Third Age. But why would Gandalf fear Sauron so much as to attempt refusing the duty asked of him? As many fans have pointed out over the years, Sauron and Gandalf are both Maiar. Being the same level of being, shouldn't Gandalf be capable of taking on Sauron alone? But as we read a moment ago, the wizards do not come to Middle-earth in their Maiar form, but in mortal coils of old men. For this, their bodies would be susceptible to mortal dangers, and their wisdom and knowledge is dimmed. And in their place, they would feel things like hunger and thirst and weariness, and fear that comes with being in a mortal form. Sauron, meanwhile, did not inhibit himself in such a way. While the wizards are meant to be guides, aiding the free peoples to take on the Dark Lord rather than confront him directly, Sauron plays by no such rules. To the best of his ability, he will use his great power in an effort to dominate all Middle-earth. Another note when it comes to the Maiar, or really any being in Arda, is that not all beings of the same kind are equal in power. One of the most overt examples of this is the Valar. While the 14 Valar are all incredibly powerful beings, there are 8 among them known as the Aratar, meaning the High Ones, or the Supreme. These 8, originally 9 before Melkor's fall, are greater than the others despite being the same kind of being. The same is true of Maiar. Just because the Balrog, Gandalf, and Sauron are all Maiar does not mean they are equal in power. We know, especially in the First Age tales, there are Maiar who are far less powerful than others. Add to this the fact that the wizards are sent to Middle-earth in physical forms that limit them considerably, and Gandalf is essentially looking at a potential face-off with Sauron, who may very well be more powerful than him to begin with, all while, metaphorically speaking, having at least one hand tied behind his back. Another point when it comes to these two great Maiar and physical forms is that Sauron has, by this time, kind of died twice. First having his physical form destroyed in the downfall of Numenor in 3319 of the Second Age. Being the first time his body was destroyed, and still possessing the One Ring, he is back to his mighty form by the time of the War of the Last Alliance, just over 100 years later. After his second bodily death at the hands of Gil-galad and Elendil, he would return 1,000 years later, prompting the Valar to send the wizards. Another factor when it comes to the daunting task of the wizards is how easily Sauron can bring great forces to bear against his enemies. While alliances and friendships within and among the realms of men, elves, and dwarves form and disband, the evil creatures of Middle-earth will inevitably fall in line under Sauron. All the centuries of work done by Morgoth and even Sauron in ages past to create and corrupt beings like orcs, trolls, dragons, and others come to benefit Sauron in the Second and Third Ages. And in lands like Rhûn, Sauron is able to play off old allegiances to Morgoth to corrupt men to his service. In short, Sauron is a mighty foe who rarely fails to have mighty forces at his call. Another thing that's notable when it comes to this foundational fear of the Grey Wizard is how rarely we see him show genuine fear during his time in Middle-earth. And I think it's thanks in part to the films that the significance of Gandalf's fear in this moment of being chose for the mission is lost on many fans. In the films, we see Gandalf hint at feeling fear against the Witch King and even have Saruman directly say Gandalf fears what lies in Moria. In the books, it seems less common to see Gandalf truly afraid. For in the books, Gandalf is actually the one suggesting the Fellowship pass through Moria, and his reaction to encountering the Balrog is to say, "A Balrog, now I understand. What an evil fortune, and I am already weary." It's certainly an acknowledgement of a powerful foe to face, but it doesn't seem that Gandalf is left fearful of the enemy himself. He knows that he can take on this foe. Likewise, Gandalf, speaking to Denethor in Minas Tirith, acknowledges that the Witch King may be a match for him. "It might be so," Gandalf answered softly, "but our trial of strength is not yet come." Now, I think these film moments certainly work from a dramatic standpoint. I'm not by any means saying they're bad decisions in what is the greatest trilogy of all time, though I'm fully on record that Gandalf v Witch King in the books is way better. These are moments in the adaptation, though, that help elevate a great threat by showing such a powerful character display moments of fear or at least great concern. Now, there is a moment in the films that hints at a book moment where Gandalf arguably shows the most fear. After Faramir returns to Minas Tirith, Gandalf discovers where Frodo and Sam have gone. As his story was unfolded of his meeting with Frodo and his servant, and of the events at Heneth Anun, Pippin became aware that Gandalf's hands were trembling as they clutched the carven wood. White they seemed now, and very old. And as he looked at them, suddenly with a thrill of fear, Pippin knew that Gandalf himself, was troubled, even afraid. The air of the room was close and still. At last, when Faramir spoke of his parting with the travelers, and of their resolve to go to Cirith Ungol, his voice fell, and he shook his head and sighed. Then Gandalf sprang up. "Cirith Ungol, Morgul Vale," he said. "The time, Faramir, the time. When did you part with them? When would they reach that accursed valley?" "I parted with them in the morning 2 days ago," said Faramir. "It is 15 leagues thence to the Vale of the Morgul Duin, if they went straight south, and then they would be still 5 leagues westward of the accursed tower. At swiftest, they could not come there before today, and maybe they have not come there yet. Indeed, I see what you fear, but the darkness is not due to their venture. It began yester eve, and all Ithilien was under shadow last night. It is clear to me that the enemy has long planned an assault on us, and its hour had already been determined before ever the travelers left my keeping. Gandalf paced the floor. The morning of 2 days ago. Nigh on 3 days of journey. How far is it the place where you parted? Clearly, Gandalf is gravely concerned about Frodo and Sam's chosen path. And seeing through Pippin's eyes, we get a sense for how rare of a sight it is to see Gandalf truly afraid. Later, Pippin would prompt Gandalf to expand on his reaction. "Tell me," he said, "is there any hope? For Frodo, I mean. Or at least mostly for Frodo." Gandalf put his hand on Pippin's head. "There never was much hope," he answered. "Just a fool's hope, as I have been told. And when I heard of Cirith Ungol..." He broke off and strode to the window as if his eyes could pierce the night in the east. "Cirith Ungol," he muttered. "Why that way, I wonder?" He turned. "Just now, Pippin, my heart almost failed me, hearing that name." The name Cirith Ungol, which translates to Cleft of the Spider, is well known to Gandalf and the men of Gondor as the dwelling place of a great spider who preys upon those who dare venture into its dreaded pass. It is also from the Morgul Vale, where Sauron's forces would come to lay siege to Minas Tirith. Likely the reason Gandalf is so concerned about the timeline of Faramir's encounter with the hobbits. As Faramir points out, the sky grew dark before the hobbits would have reached the valley, so the attack itself is not in response to the enemy regaining the ring. And this specific example points to the key of Gandalf's fear all those centuries ago, when he was chosen as one of the Istari, the fear of failure. The first thing he said in response to Manwe was that he was too weak for such a task. Between his fear of failure and his fear of Sauron, Manwe says it is all the more reason why he should go. Gandalf is, perhaps more than any of the other Maiar, aware of the threats he faces. In Gandalf, we see a being keenly aware of his limitations, his temptations, a pity for those he is sent to help, and an awareness of the powerful forces working against them. And in the other wizards, we see what the lack of these qualities brings forth. In Radagast, a preoccupation with his own personal interests in nature and wildlife, to the detriment of the free peoples. In Saruman, hubris and desire for victory at all costs that leads to his own corruption and downfall. But in Gandalf, the awareness of his fears and ultimately not succumbing to them is what would bring about the great victory over the ultimate enemy. And the only Istar who did not wish to go on this mission would be the one to ultimately ensure its success. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, CCDC Red Team, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Madame Director, Freya Firestar, Chris and Meg Q, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Z and N, Evely, Kia, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.